Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. Not that it was planned, nothing's really planned anymore, is it? You're tuned into station 1140, still broadcasting from the old lighthouse studio above the cliffs, just outside what used to be Crescent Bay. If you can still hear this, well, that means the generator held through the morning shift. That's something. We're going to stay on the air as long as we can. We owe you that much. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to let me know where you're tuning in from and the local time, if clocks still matter where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The tide should be pulling in now. This time last year, you could hear it slapping the rocks just below the cliffs. Now there's nothing but wind and the slow creak of saltless air moving through empty hulls. It began quiet, like most things worth noticing. The first reports came out of the southern archipelagos, waterlines receding faster than usual, tides misbehaving, harbors falling dry overnight. Then came the images, trawlers tilted in the dust, coral beds exposed under early morning sun, barnacle patterns like scars across the new land. Within 24 hours, the Atlantic and Indian basins were dry, not low, not evaporated, dry.
No weather anomaly, no warning swell, just silence. Long aching silence, where there used to be movement, and breath, and tide.
Our local station received its first confirmed transmission around 3:20 a.m. UTC. A freighter off the coast of São Tomé reported loss of horizon. That was the phrase, loss of horizon. By dawn, they were grounded, no distress signal, just a long loop of Morse code in a single word, hollow. Since then, we've had confirmation from what's left of the European Hydrological Union. Sea levels dropped below detection thresholds in all basins, from Reykjavik to Port Moresby. The coastlines have doubled, in some places tripled. If you're near a port town, you've seen it. Ships stranded like museum pieces, waiting for a tide that won't return. We lost contact with 5 underwater listening stations before noon yesterday. That includes the entire Poseidon array off the South Pacific, cables intact, power steady, just no data, like they're still online, but there's nothing left to hear. A few of the coastal labs are calling it a global subsidence event. The theory is that vast subterranean cavities have opened beneath the oceanic crust, maybe through tectonic thinning or some kind of pressurized collapse. The idea is simple. The oceans didn't vanish. They drained, fell inward, out of reach. Still, others have their doubts. A retired geophysicist in Norway insists that nothing beneath us could swallow that much volume. No caverns that size have ever been recorded, not even on the moon. She believes the oceans were displaced, somehow lifted, perhaps, or shifted out of phase. Her words, not mine. As though they slip between layers of this world and another. Meanwhile, the moon continues its path, unbothered. It used to govern the tides. Now it hangs above a planet with nothing left to move. It's just a light in the sky now, no more than that. Atmospheric conditions have shifted in the last 18 hours. Without the moisture from the seas, we're seeing steep drops in humidity. Dust clouds are rising over the seafloors. Coastal vegetation, what's left of it, is wilting. There's talk of mass desiccation events inland. If you're noticing cracked skin, dry lips, or nosebleeds, it's not just you. The air is changing. We recommend sealing windows tonight. Cover doorways with cloth if you can spare it. Moisture will be harder to retain going forward. Humidifiers, if you have them, will soon be relics. Some listeners have sent in photos, fish fossilized in place on the seabed, crabs frozen mid-scuttle, whole reefs turned to chalk. One caller from British Columbia said they followed the old tide line for miles and found a whale, still warm, eyes wide open, surrounded by gulls that didn't know what to do. And somewhere deep beneath the floor of what used to be the Pacific, there's a signal. No one's claiming responsibility for it. It pulses slowly, every 38 seconds. Some think it's leftover sonar. Some think it's a natural echo bouncing through the newly hollow chambers of Earth. And some believe it's a warning, a heartbeat, something waking up now that the seas are gone. Scientists still debate whether this is purely geologic or something else. A collapse in Earth's core temperature, a planetary phase shift, or as one paper hypothesizes, a shift in gravity itself, localized, impermanent, but wide enough to pull the oceans downward. But we're not here to panic. We're here to document, to stay present, to offer a voice, even as the sea goes quiet. So if you're listening out there, wherever out there is now, pour yourself a little water. If you've got any left, hold the glass up to the window and remember what it looked like once to see waves crash under moonlight. You're still with us. It's just past midnight here at the station. No boats on the horizon, no birds, just the soft whine of dry wind moving through the signal towers and the occasional groan from the cliffs as they settle into their new stillness. If you're near an old harbor, you might be hearing something similar. A kind of breathing silence, like the planet is pausing between thoughts. We've received reports from a team in southern Portugal. They walked out nearly 12 kilometers into what used to be open water. No diving gear, no boats, just boots crunching over coral and rust. They found salt mostly, endless stretches of it, as fine as flour in places, baked to glass in others.
The seabed is a strange place when exposed. It wasn't meant to be looked at. You can feel that in the way it stretches, wide and silent. You can walk it, but you don't belong there. Not really.
This evening the wind has picked up slightly. It carries a taste now, not salt, exactly. Something metallic, like old coins, or the air inside a dry aquarium. Listeners from the southern coast have mentioned it too. Some say it burns a little when you breathe too deep. Most are learning not to. There's a running theory from a university lab in Argentina. They've modeled the global pressure drop caused by the ocean's disappearance and concluded that the balance of surface temperature and hydrospheric pressure has shifted too far, too quickly. Their projection shows a slow loss of breathable humidity over the next 3 to 6 weeks. Now, before that sends anyone into a spiral, this isn't suffocation. It's more like living in an unsealed jar. Everything just dries out. Skin, soil. Here at the station, we've lined the windows with wet towels. The older engineer says it's useless, but he still helps hang them every few hours. There's comfort in ritual, I suppose. We heard from an old mariner today, broadcast in through the emergency channel, said he was in the Gulf when the water vanished. One moment he was asleep on deck, the next the boat tipped onto the sand with a soft thud, like setting down a loaf of bread. He hasn't seen another soul since. Claims the seabed hums at night, and the sand beneath him feels warm like skin. Take that, as you will. Another report, this one from inland Australia. A family walking into what used to be a shallow coral zone came across an entire school of preserved fish. Hundreds, arranged as if frozen in the act of swimming. Some upright, some angled mid-turn, their eyes dry and glassy, reflected the sky above like they'd never stopped watching it. Fringe circles have started to interpret these signs. A belief is forming, slowly, softly, around the idea that the ocean wasn't a thing, but a being, that it's not dead, only missing, that we didn't lose water, we lost a presence. They're calling it the vanishing.
I know. It's a bit theatrical. But then again, when you walk across the floor of what used to be the North Sea and find a message scratched into the barnacled hull of a battleship that reads, "It went down to think," you start to wonder if we ever truly understood this sea at all.
Scientists still debate whether this event is part of a longer cycle. A few voices, quiet ones, point at ancient sediment records that may suggest this happened once before, tens of millions of years ago. A brief geological blink, a memory Earth chose not to keep. Meanwhile, myths are blooming. One of them, the kind that makes the rounds in late-night AM stations like this one, says the sea didn't vanish. It withdrew, not from pressure, not from gravity, but from us. That it reached a kind of moral tipping point and folded itself into the deep crust, away from our noise and our damage. That it's sleeping now beneath the mantle, dreaming of a planet where it's left alone.
That's not science. That's just the kind of thing lonely people tell each other on static-filled frequencies.
Still, I keep thinking about that message. It went down to think, makes you pause. The cities along the coast have emptied out. People packed their bags and moved inland, not for safety, but because the view is unbearable. Entire landscapes that used to sparkle are now endless fields of white and beige, no motion, no glint, just absence, textured. And where there was once music, the hush of waves, the lullaby of tide, there's only stillness, a flat, ambient hush that presses against your ears like a held breath. We've set up a low-frequency microphone outside the station. Every hour or so, it catches a sound, a subtle tremor. Could be the earth settling, could be something deeper, could be nothing. But when you listen to it through headphones and slow it down, it sounds a little like whispering, the kind you hear through closed doors, or just as you're falling asleep. If you've got access to a recording device, start documenting. If nothing else, leave your own record. Speak into it. Describe the sky, the smell of the ground, the way your hands feel. These things matter. They always have. We're still here. After all, it's just after 2 a.m. and the wind's shifting again. Slower now. Drier, almost soft, like breath against glass. The clouds haven't come back, not properly. We had one small patch earlier, pale and low, like a loose thread in the sky. It drifted over the dry harbor without casting a shadow. We used to say that weather starts over the oceans, that storms, jet streams, the great arcs of cloud and pressure, all of it, began with the warm breath of the sea. Without it, the sky feels rudderless, like it's moving because it doesn't know what else to do. Earlier this evening, a listener from what used to be the Outer Banks radioed in, said their local radar showed a system stored overhead for almost 12 hours. No rain, no lightning, just cloud cover thick and gray, like a ceiling that forgot how to fall. The same listener said it felt like being under a lid. That was their exact phrase, a lid. We're hearing similar stories from Iceland, Baja California, parts of southern Japan, systems forming, but not breaking. Like the energy's still there, but the cycle's incomplete. These ghost storms, as some have started calling them, hover for hours or even days, then drift apart, like tired smoke.
A meteorologist I trust. Someone who's been quietly monitoring satellite data since before all this began. shared something unsettling tonight. She said the atmosphere is changing shape, not the composition. Not yet. But the geometry, patterns that should be sweeping west, are now curling in on themselves, jet streams looping lower, moisture bands collapsing without forming clouds.
She believes the oceans acted like a kind of planetary memory, holding temperature, rhythm, pattern. Without that anchor, the system doesn't know how to behave. Still others aren't buying it. One publication, an independent, fringe science digest, claims this is the result of a failed experiment in geoengineering, that an atmospheric dispersal project in the Arctic backfired, initiating a cascade that altered barometric boundaries and triggered an oceanic sink. They don't name sources. They never do. But the idea has spread. Some believe it wasn't an accident, that whoever triggered it knew the consequences and did it anyway. What we do know is that moisture is vanishing from the air. Humidity sensors in most coastal regions now read below 8%. That's lower than some deserts. If you've got anything living in the house, plants, pets, yourself, consider misting the air when you can. Even a pot of water near a heater helps. It won't stop the shift, but it slows it, makes the space feel less brittle. From the old boardwalk down the road, I can see where the surf used to end. There's a distinct color change, sand to gray, salt to bone, on clear nights. That line reflects moonlight, like a scar. You can walk it barefoot, if you're careful. Just be sure to watch for exposed rock teeth and bits of broken pier. Nothing down there wants to be stepped on. Some survivors have taken to painting the old tide line across the walls of their homes, a thin blue stripe, 6 feet high in some places, not out of fear, more like reverence, as if to say, this is where the sea once touched me. Last week, a man in Tunis built a small shrine from driftwood and plastic bottles, lit a single candle at dusk. When asked who it was for, he simply said, "The sky doesn't listen anymore." He's not wrong. Even the birds seem confused. Without maritime currents to guide them, migration patterns are collapsing. We've had reports of swallows flying in wide, lazy spirals over landlocked towns, seagulls turning up hundreds of miles inland, starving. One boy found a pelican in a wheat field outside Kansas, alive, but barely. A few ornithologists have proposed the idea of aerial disorientation, an echo effect from magnetic realignment. It's possible the disappearance of vast saltwater masses has disrupted Earth's field lines, that the absence of fluid movement has unbalanced the planet's slow internal engine. Scientists still debate whether this phenomenon is a symptom or a trigger. One study, yet to be peer-reviewed, suggests that the sea's departure was the result of a deeper shift in planetary magnetism, not the cause. That Earth may be reconfiguring itself from the core outward. Whatever the sequence, the skies are quieter now, not just in sound, but in feeling. Listeners often write in describing it as a kind of emotional weightlessness, as if something sacred has been erased, and the body is waiting for permission to grieve. Here at the station, we've begun recording long ambient stretches, just wind, distant static, the occasional creak of the mast. They're not meant to teach or inform. They're just memory. Long, slow memory for a world adjusting to a new rhythm. You can hear it, sometimes, if you listen carefully, beneath the hum. A slight echo between the gusts, not a voice, not music, just a pattern, faint, like a tide without water. There's no rain in the forecast, not tonight, not tomorrow. But if you find yourself standing in the middle of what used to be a storm, look up, Notice how still the sky is, how clean the stars have become. And if you feel a breeze, even just the faintest brush across your skin, count yourself lucky. Something is still moving. It's almost 3 a.m. now, and we're still here, broadcasting quietly, steadily, from the same room we've always used. The same table, the same mic, the walls hum a little when the wind shifts, too dry for comfort, but not quite dangerous yet. Just different. If you're still awake, if you're still listening, you're not alone.
There's been a new wave of stories coming in tonight. Unusual, even by recent standards, from Greenland to the Canary Islands. People are saying things have started falling from the sky. Not water, not hail. Fish.
Small ones, mostly, silver and pale, frozen solid. Some no bigger than a child's hand. A few appear mid-air, with no clouds above, just open sky. They land softly, lightly, like something placed them down rather than drop. Witnesses describe a moment of stillness before it happens. The wind stops, birds go silent, then a handful of tiny bodies float down like leaves in autumn. One report from Sicily described them as praying fish, mouths open, tails curled, eyes wide, a strange, sad rain. This is not a global occurrence, at least not yet, but the pattern is spreading. We received word from a freight checkpoint in northern Chile. 47 fish found on the roof of a customs warehouse. No water damage, no birds nearby, just a layer of frost clinging to their scales. A scientist from Japan speculated on air pressure inversions, that these fish were pulled into the sky by sudden uplifts, flash frozen and released elsewhere. A rare meteorological fluke, she said, multiplied by new atmospheric tensions. It's plausible, possible, even. But another voice, speaking from a small radio co-op in Newfoundland, offered a different view. He believes these are the last echoes of deep-sea life, residue left behind by whatever force took the oceans. The water was moved, he said, but the fish are trying to find their way back. Others say the fish whisper when they fall, that if you're close enough and the wind is still enough, you can hear them. It's always the same phrase, they claim. We stayed behind.
No one has a recording. Maybe no one ever will.
Still, the rumors grow. Meanwhile, emergency services in lowland Europe have begun shifting their focus, not to water recovery, but to soil integrity. What was once damp, breathable ground is becoming hollow, fractured. Salt left behind by the sea is pulling moisture from nearby vegetation. Roots are crumbling, fields are turning brittle underfoot. One agronomist described it like farming on glass. Hydration packs are now being rationed in several inland cities, not for drinking, but for stabilizing food growth chambers. Lettuce, mushrooms, indoor herbs, all of them now rely on artificial moisture. No rain, no dew, just misters and memory. We've also lost contact with another station tonight, this time in Sri Lanka. Last signal was brief. One line, repeated over a loop. The sea is not gone. It's just further away. Nothing since. Scientists still debate whether these isolated anomalies, falling fish, shifting soil, vanishing signals, are connected. One hypothesis suggests a transient distortion in gravity fields caused by uneven mass redistribution following ocean loss. It's a mouthful, but it means the planet might be wobbling ever so slightly. Another theory, more poetic than scientific, suggests that these events are responses, not causes, that Earth, having lost a limb, is adjusting her posture, that each echo, each strange moment, is a realignment. At the station, we try not to draw conclusions. Our job is to describe, not to decide. Still, it's hard not to wonder. Tonight, the power has held steady. No surges, no blackouts, just the steady hum of our old backup generator, fed by whatever fuel's left in the basement drum. We keep it company with stories and old vinyl. There's a comfort in the analog now. It doesn't blink at signals, it just plays. A shortwave listener from the Faroe Islands sent in a message written by hand, scanned and relayed through a repeater station. It read, "We brought one of the fish inside, wrapped it in wool. It didn't melt, it didn't rot, it just stayed, like it was waiting for something." These are the days we live in now. People gather in dry harbors, holding radios. They listen not for news, but for companionship, a voice, a moment of shared time.
We're not meant to live without oceans. That much is clear. The sea shaped everything. Our language, our sleep, the salt on our skin. Without it, the world feels untethered, like a clock still ticking with no hands.
But here, in this little studio, the signal still goes out. A line in the dark, a reminder that someone's still speaking, still paying attention.
So, if you're sitting alone tonight, maybe with a blanket over your shoulders and a glass of water warming quietly by your side, listen.
Let the radio breathe. Let the quiet carry you. And if by chance something falls from the sky where you are, catch it gently. It's nearly 4 a.m. The studio lights are dimmed now, just the soft amber lamp by the console, and the slow rhythm of static behind my voice. If you're still with me, welcome back. If you drifted off and came back, that's all right too. Sleep is different these days. It comes in waves, even if the sea no longer does. We've just received new satellite imagery from what used to be the Western Pacific. The data's old, by now probably 8 hours behind, but it's enough to see the outline of the empty basin, a bowl the size of a continent, rimmed by shadow where the seafloor once fell deeper than light could reach.
There's something unnerving about it. The shape of it, like seeing the inside of your own body on an X-ray. Beautiful in a quiet way, but not meant to be looked at so long.
People are starting to redraw maps, not governments, not officially, but individuals, cartographers, artists, children. A teacher in Dakar emailed us a scan of a crayon drawing from one of her students, a world map, carefully labeled, only there's no blue anywhere, just land tan, gold, gray, and in one corner, a note written in shaky handwriting, "Water went home." There's a movement now, grassroots. Folks on message boards and ham radio circles are collecting these new maps, sharing coordinates, naming what used to be seabeds. Some are giving them peaceful names: Saltwind Valley, the Coral Plains, Dustwave Reach. Others, darker, the Hollow Deep, Ash Rift, Dead Sea 2, language adapting, as it always does. Still, the official channels are behind. Major agencies continue to refer to temporary marine retreat events, though no reversal has occurred, not even a trickle. The longer it goes, the more hollow those phrases sound.
This evening, I spoke to a marine historian, someone who spent most of his life cataloging sunken ships, undersea trade routes, and forgotten wrecks. He sounded tired, said this is the first time in history he's witnessed a reverse shipwreck. Vessels rising from the seabed, cleaned by time and tide. Now resting in dry air, their stories open to the sky.
In the old Atlantic lanes, once proud ships lie on their sides like sleeping beasts, barnacles cracking in the sun, masts collapsing under their own weight, lifeboats still tethered. never used. You can walk among them now. One woman in Mauritania described her walk through the rusted ribs of a cargo freighter, said it felt like visiting a cathedral, quiet, windless, sacred in its decay. She found a compass still clinging to the captain's desk, needle spinning slowly, uncertain where to point. That's something we've heard more often lately. Magnetic drift, compasses stuttering, points shifting a few degrees. Then more, not enough to cause panic, just enough to lose your sense of direction when you least expect it. Scientists still debate whether the sudden removal of massive oceanic weight has triggered minor shifts in the planet's crust. Subtle movements, tectonic hesitations. There are murmurs of long dormant fault lines, stirring, places that haven't moved in thousands of years now, sighing beneath the surface. But that's only theory. Others believe the oceans were never a natural feature, that they were placed, held, maintained. Some even say they were on loan, that this world was a temporary host, and the seas were never ours to keep. Stories like these tend to grow legs late at night. Still, something is shifting. You can feel it in the architecture. The old coastal towns seem more fragile than before. Walls creak, windows resist the wind. Salt, long embedded in the wood and stone, dries and pulls the material apart from within. It's a slow crumbling, a patient undoing. Down by the southern piers, what's left of the fish market sits quiet, crates overturned, scales catching moonlight. The smell of brine replaced by dust. Sometimes the old broadcast tower there catches interference, just a pulse, a flicker. No words, but it's always strongest near low tide, where tide used to be. We've been monitoring it, of course, recording the hum, cross-checking it against seismic activity, frequency patterns, even oceanic sonar archives. Nothing matches. It's just there. Some of the more speculative engineers have dubbed it the signal beneath. They believe it was masked before, hidden beneath the sound of waves, lost in the rhythm of currents. Now, with the sea gone, it's able to rise. Still, no one agrees on its origin, and no one knows why it only pulses at night. If you're listening from a former coastal zone, and you hear it, we'd love to know what it sounds like where you are. Some say it's rhythmic, like a slow breath. Others describe it as more organic, like a voice without words. Or perhaps it's nothing more than wishful thinking, a world without water, still craving the sound of it. Here at the station, we've taken to playing old recordings. Ocean waves, harbor sounds, foghorns, not because they're needed, but because they feel like company, memory, on loop. I'll play one in a moment, but first, if you're still awake or just waking, look outside if you can. Notice how the stars seem clearer now, like the absence of moisture has cleaned the lens of the sky. The world is quieter, lighter, and somewhere, deep in that silence, something is moving. The time is just past 5 a.m. here. Still dark, still dry. The sky outside the studio window looks more like paper than atmosphere now, thin, dull, not quite black. There's no moon tonight, just stars. They flicker harder without the moisture in the air, more exposed, more fragile. It's strange how beautiful it all still is. If you're just tuning in, welcome. You haven't missed much, just the slow end of the world, unfolding softly hour by hour. We're still on station 1140, bringing you what we can from where we are. As long as the power holds, we'll keep the light on. We've been receiving recordings from field teams across the exposed ocean floors. Not researchers, not anymore, just volunteers, journalists, even a few musicians. People walking the new deserts of the world, gathering sound, One recording in particular caught our attention tonight. Taken near what used to be the edge of the Mariana Trench, the team placed a contact microphone down at the rim, let it run for 7 hours. Most of it was nothing. Wind, shifting debris, the occasional creak of old hulls settling. But just after the 4th hour, there's a low thrum, like metal under pressure, or breath from something too large to see. They looped the segment and sent it to us. We've had it playing quietly in the background here. Some say it's just the ground shifting as it adjusts to the weight change. Others insist it's something deeper, something alive. The local communities that used to fish those waters have started telling stories again, old ones. Things their grandparents whispered but never wrote down. Legends of the trench, of voices in the deep. Not human, not hostile, just waiting. One elder said it simply. They didn't rise because they needed water. They rose because we left it behind. Of course, that's not a scientific explanation, but science doesn't cover much these days. Technically speaking, the Mariana Trench should now be a giant canyon, open, walkable, maybe even habitable in some parts, and yet none of the teams who've gone down have made it past the rim. It's not terrain, it's mood. Everyone reports the same thing. A heaviness, a wrongness, a sense of being too visible and too ignored at the same time. Some teams have started calling it the floor, capital F. They speak about it the way sailors once spoke of sirens and icebergs, with a kind of respectful fear. Scientists still debate whether this psychological reaction is due to environmental exposure, dry oceanic gases, reduced oxygen saturation, electromagnetic shifts. One report suggests a mild form of altitude sickness, as though we've moved too far from sea level and the body knows it even if the mind doesn't. But fringe groups are spinning their own stories. A popular thread on a survivalist forum describes the trench as a sealed place, not meant to be opened, that when the oceans were taken, it wasn't to hurt us, but to hold something in. Now that the water is gone, what was once buried can breathe. You don't have to believe it, but it's getting harder to explain the feeling people describe down there. Still, there's no official advisory, no warning, just the occasional whisper between broadcasts. Don't go too far, don't stay too long. Closer to home, some of our local volunteers spent the day walking what used to be the continental shelf. They said it felt endless, like a forgotten plain, shaped by hands that had long since moved on. They passed coral arches, the size of churches, whale bones bleached white as chalk, old ropes tangled like veins across the dust. One of them picked up a metal sign half buried in silt. It read, "No swimming." She laughed when she told us, said it felt like the last joke Earth had left. We've started keeping a map here at the station, not one of land or sea, but of these moments, small encounters with the past. A buoy found in a desert, a compass that spins without stopping, a recording of silence that still hums.
They're like echoes, like the world's way of remembering itself out loud.
If you're awake right now, maybe you've noticed it too. The way certain things feel louder in the absence of waves, the creak of your walls, the hum of your refrigerator, the sound of your own breath in a still room. You're not imagining it. The absence of the sea has unmasked the world, and in that absence, every sound becomes a story. So take a moment. Listen carefully. If you're near what used to be the ocean, open a window, if it's safe. Let the air drift in. Notice how thin it feels, how quiet. And if you hear something strange, something faint and low, rising from the ground beneath you, don't be afraid. It may just be the trench remembering how to speak.
The horizon is starting to lighten now, barely, that early blue-gray that isn't quite sunrise, but no longer night. The studio clock says 6:01 a.m. I haven't slept, and I doubt you have either, but there's a kind of comfort in the stillness, isn't there? The way everything holds its breath at the edge of day, like the world is waiting to see if the sun will bother rising.
You're listening to Station 1140. I'm still here. You're still here. That's enough for now. This hour, we've been hearing more from the inland zones, dry zones, places that just weeks ago felt the touch of sea air, even if they weren't on the coast. Humidity has dropped to record lows across vast swaths of the globe. In some cities, it's like the air has hollowed out. Less atmosphere, more echo. People are describing a new kind of breathlessness. Not choking, not illness, just a thinness to the world, a lightness in the lungs that makes sleep harder, thoughts fainter, and memories more vivid. It's something we're calling salt air phantom, the sensation that you're still breathing an ocean breeze, even when there's nothing left of it. One caller from Lisbon said she wakes every night to the smell of seaweed, even though the ocean's miles away now. She says it fades after a few seconds, like a memory that knows it doesn't belong. That's becoming more common. Phantom tides, salt hallucinations, dry surf. The brain, they say, is trying to fill in what the body no longer receives. Scientists still debate whether this is neurological trauma, sensory compensation, or simply mass nostalgia. After all, most of us have known the sea our entire lives. We've shaped our calendars, our cultures, our cuisine around it. Without it, something in us flickers. The climatologist, out of Cairo, shared a theory last night. He believes the evaporation and reabsorption cycles of the planet weren't just about water, they were emotional too. That the sea wasn't just part of the weather, it was part of our psychology. He compared the oceans to lungs, breathing for the planet. Yes, but also for us, regulating the internal rhythm of things we didn't even know needed regulating. And now that the breath is gone, well, elsewhere, the air grows brittle. In the former equatorial belt, sand is on the move again, not dune by dune, but layer by layer. Microstorms rise from the seafloor and drift slowly inland. They don't roar, they don't sting, they just move. Grains of memory, carried by winds too tired to howl. This morning I received a field report from the edge of the Andaman Basin. A geologist walked the basin for 6 hours, documenting sediment layers, salinity pockets, even old volcanic ridges now bare to the eye. But what struck him most wasn't the geology, it was the sound. He said the ground whispered when you walked on it. Not voices, not words, just a frictionless sigh, a soft resistance, as if the earth wasn't used to being touched there. And maybe it isn't. Some people have taken to walking barefoot through the exposed shallows. They say it grounds them, literally, like they're connecting with something older than any of us, the underbelly of history. A woman in Belize said she walked 12 miles across the Caribbean seafloor and came upon a rusted anchor, the size of a car, half buried, wrapped in coral bones. She sat next to it for hours, feeling the wind push over the flat nothingness, said it felt like sitting next to a sleeping god. Others are less poetic. In lowland Brazil, makeshift shelters are rising along the dry coast, people displaced not by flooding, but by the sea's absence, fishermen with no trade, dock workers with no docks. The economy of water was vast, and its collapse has left invisible craters in every ledger. And yet, there's no panic.
That's the strangest part.
No riots, no fire. Just a quiet grieving, like the world knows it must adapt, even if it doesn't know how. In the spiritual circles, those groups that gather by candlelight and radio light, there's a growing belief that this is not a loss, but a pause, that the oceans have retreated for a reason, that they are watching, waiting for a sign of change. They call this phase the listening. It's not universal, but it's spreading among the old, especially those who remember the tides, not just as scenery, but as routine. Wake with the tide, sleep with the tide, measure the day by the scent of salt on the wind.
Now they light lanterns at dusk, whisper songs to empty shorelines, mark the sand with circles and hope.
You don't have to believe in these rituals, but it's hard to ignore their tenderness. We are, after all, creatures of pattern, and when the pattern breaks, we look for new ones to hold. If you're listening now, maybe you felt it too, that pause, that breath before the next thing. You look out at the world and feel like something is waiting. Maybe it's us. Maybe we're what's being waited on. Or maybe it's just wind over an empty seafloor and a voice on the radio keeping time with the silence. Either way, you're not alone. We'll be here when the light comes. It's just after 7 a.m., and the light outside has shifted again. Cool, faint, a kind of dull gold that doesn't reflect. It just rests on surfaces like dust. The sky is empty of color. No pinks, no orange, just a soft beige haze that stretches from one end of the horizon to the other. We used to call this morning. Now it feels like a pause before the next moment. If you're listening now, you're part of a quiet kind of miracle, still tuned in, still breathing, still holding on in a world that has grown quieter by the hour. We've had new reports from the island chains.
What used to be island chains, I should say. Places like the Maldives, Tuvalu and the Lesser Antilles have become something else entirely. Their borders, once defined by the embrace of water, are now wide and exposed. You can walk between them in some cases. Long stretches of pale, caked seabed link once distant lands like forgotten footpaths.
And these places, these former islands, are changing fast. Without the buffering humidity of the sea, their ecosystems are unraveling. Palm trees wither, salt winds etch everything to a dull white. Birds migrate inland and do not return. The people who remain tell us that the silence is most striking. You can hear your own shoes scrape the ground 100 meters away. Voices carry farther than they should, and sometimes they don't carry at all. A botanist from St. Lucia sent in a field note. She described a new kind of plant growth emerging in the dry shallows, low silver-leafed vines that twist around coral bones and shipwreck debris. She called them salt catchers, not an official name, but it fits. These plants seem to drink from the air itself, pulling microscopic moisture into small, pulsing bladders. No one knows how long they'll last, or if they're native, or if they've always been there, hidden below, waiting for air. Some believe they're a gift, a kind of offering, life remembering itself. Scientists still debate whether these species are evolutionary anomalies or accelerated responses to the new environment. One theory suggests that certain dormant seeds, buried in the seabed for thousands of years, are now awakening. Another proposes they were introduced, though no one can say by whom. Fringe circles, as always, have their own thoughts. A quiet thread weaving through shortwave chatter claims these plants aren't plants at all, but messengers, that they are listening, slowly mapping where the ocean used to be. Not all the stories make sense, but not all of them need to. In some places, the land has risen, literally. The lack of weight from the missing water has caused post-glacial rebound in certain regions. Iceland, Alaska, parts of Scandinavia, all showing measurable uplift, centimeters each week. It's a strange thing, isn't it? That in the absence of pressure, the earth rises, like it's trying to stand taller, as if to see where the sea went. One researcher joked that it's like the continents are shrugging, trying to ask the sky what happens next. But beneath the humor, there's a growing concern. If the ground is shifting upward, what else might be shifting below? Seismic activity has increased in some regions. Soft quakes, gentle rolls, no major collapses yet, but the kind of tremors that rattle glasses and make dogs bark before dawn. Old buildings groan. Dust shakes loose from the corners of empty rooms.
If you're feeling these movements where you are, stay alert, not alarmed, just aware.
At the edge of the old coasts, strange settlements are forming, not cities, not camps, just clusters, people gathering near where the waves once came in, as if drawn to the memory. They build small shelters from driftwood and metal. They light fires in the evenings. They listen to radios. And they wait. One man, near what used to be the coast of Mozambique, built a long wooden bench facing the seafloor. He sits there each evening with his daughter, says he's watching for the water. Not expecting it, just watching. A woman in Papua New Guinea built a bell tower from discarded buoys. Each night, as the air cools, she rings it once, a signal, she says, for any wave still trying to find its way home. There is a kind of sacredness to these rituals. No doctrine, no leader, just quiet acts of remembrance, people honoring what was lost without trying to fix it. That's rare. Here in the studio, we've added a new tone to our broadcast every hour, a low chime, almost like a lighthouse bell. It's not meant to warn, it's meant to mark the time, a sound to carry across the silence, something for those out walking the basins or sitting in the ruins of piers, to hear and know you are not alone. Some of you have written in to say the chime helps you sleep. Others say it makes them cry. Either way, we'll keep it going. We've always believed that the ocean shaped our coasts, but maybe it shaped more than that. Maybe it shaped our sense of time, our sense of depth, our sense of distance from one another. Now that it's gone, we're relearning how to measure things. If you're listening now, take a moment. Close your eyes. If it's safe, breathe in. Let the still air settle in your lungs. Feel the ground beneath you. Listen for the chime. And remember, the world is quieter now. But you're still here, still listening, still connected to a story that hasn't ended yet. It's 8 a.m. now. The kind of morning that doesn't quite feel earned. There's light, yes, but no warmth. Just a pale glow that falls over everything like frost. If you step outside, it greets you with silence. No gulls, no surf, only the hush of dry wind over distant metal ship chains clinking gently in the places where harbors used to breathe. We've had a number of updates from the old port cities, places like New Orleans, Genoa, Qingdao, Valparaiso, places once defined by their relationship with the sea. Now they stand exposed, stripped of their purpose. Piers stretch out into nothing. Moorings dangle slack. Sea walls border only dust. They're calling them harbors of dust now. And there's something haunting about that phrase, isn't there? Harbors without water, designed for arrival, for departure, now stuck in endless stillness, waiting for a tide that won't return. A friend of the station, an old dock worker from Boston, sent in a voice message this morning. He'd walked the length of the bay, down into the mudflat that used to hold container ships. He described the eerie sound of his boots pulling free from the silt, the barnacle-crusted hulls leaning like old men in the wind. And then he said something that stuck with me all morning. Everything's here, but it's all in the wrong place. That's what it feels like, walking through these harbors. Familiar things, out of context. Ropes curled on dry ground. Buoys resting where waves once rocked them gently. The skeletons of ships, their shadows stretching where water once softened their shape. The air near these ports carries a strange taste now. Something metallic and dry, like the inside of a closed radiator. Some say it's just the salt. Others claim it's rust from the docks, turned to powder and swept into the breeze. But the scent lingers, clings to your clothes, your skin, your memory. We've received recordings from as far as Rotterdam and Yokohama. Long ambient stretches of these dry docks, no human voices, just the sound of loose cable tapping hollow metal, the creak of cranes swaying slightly, and wind passing through skeletal terminals. Engineers from a university in the UK have been studying the decay patterns of dock infrastructure in the absence of seawater. They've found something odd. Some materials are aging faster. Steel beams corroding at nearly double the expected rate, wooden supports drying and fracturing, as if time itself had accelerated. They suspect the sudden removal of brine saturation and the exposure to open air are acting like a shock to these systems, like muscle that's been submerged for too long, now flexing and tearing under its own weight. Others aren't convinced. A smaller, quieter theory suggests these harbors are responding not just physically, but symbolically. That place is built for movement, for contact with something now missing, are collapsing under the grief of their disconnection.
You won't find that in the journals, but the people living in these places, they understand.
One listener from Liverpool described how, each morning, he walks the dry edge of the Mersey, listening for echoes beneath the pier boards. He says there's still a rhythm there. Not water, not quite, but a residual pulse, like something remembering how to flow. He brought a radio with him yesterday, tuned into this frequency, let it play quietly as he walked, said it helped the space feel less empty, as though the sound of a human voice made the silence seem less final. We've had others do the same, listeners leaving radios in old beach shacks, hanging them on ropes along dock rails. Some even place them in the hulls of abandoned boats, just voices humming out across the emptiness. A few have written in with stranger encounters. One woman in Brittany claims she found a small fishing skiff miles from the coast, wedged into the dried silt, inside a thermos, still warm, a sweater, a notebook, and a portable radio tuned to this station.
No footprints around it, no signs of arrival or departure.
She left it untouched. Sometimes presence is enough. Scientists still debate whether these harbors are undergoing standard entropy, or whether the environment is now in a new phase of collapse, an exposure state, as one researcher calls it, a condition in which human structures, long balanced by water's touch, are now left defenseless against air and time. Fringe thinkers take it further. One voice on a late-night loop insisted the harbors are not decaying, they're shedding, becoming something else, that the materials are reacting to the absence of the sea by preparing for transition. He never clarified what that meant, but I find myself looking at rust a little differently now. At this station, we've pulled some of the old maritime charts off the walls, not because they're obsolete, but because they're starting to feel like fiction. They show depth where there is none, movement where there is stillness. They're maps of memory now. One of the engineers folded his and slipped it into a notebook. Said he wanted to carry it with him, in case the tide ever returned. He said, maybe it'll remember where to go. That's how we talk now, not in certainties, but in hopes with quiet edges. So if you're near a former harbor, if the wind still smells like salt and rust, if the docks still creak, know that you're standing in a place built to receive, a place made to hold what's coming and guide what's leaving. Even now, even empty, it remembers how to welcome, and maybe, one day, it will again. It's nearing 9 a.m. now. The sun has technically risen, though you wouldn't know it by looking out the window. The light is flat, pale, barely a suggestion of warmth across the dried hillside, no shadows to speak of, just long stretches of gray-brown earth and the occasional glint of salt dust swirling through the air. Here at station 1140, the signal's steady, the tower held through the night, the generator's quiet, and if you're still with me, across some empty stretch of coast or inland plain, I'm glad to have you here. This hour, we're heading farther east, to a ridge that used to overlook the Pacific, near what was once considered a shipping corridor, not far from Manila. The transmission we received earlier this morning was grainy, but clear enough, a voice describing the trench's edge, not the deepest part, just the rim. But what they saw there hasn't left my thoughts since. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff that didn't used to exist. The ground slopes gently, then suddenly drops. A wall of black stone disappears downward into cold shadow. There's no water to soften it now, no currents, no veil of blue, just emptiness. The voice on the tape described it as a canyon so deep the sky looked afraid of it. They stood there for a long time. This team set up instruments, ran basic geological scans, took photographs, but the air was different, they said, heavier, still, like something was watching them from far below, not malevolent, just aware. They lowered a simple sound recorder down on a cable, let it dangle over the edge. What came back was mostly static, mixed with faint structural echoes, but underneath, so low, it needed amplification, was a pulse, not steady, not mechanical, but consistent, like a breath with no lungs. It isn't the first report. Others have come in over the last few days, from ridges all along the Pacific Ring. They speak of strange acoustics in the deepest zones, voices that aren't voices, a sense of movement with no visible source. The official explanation so far is seismic stress, the Earth adjusting to the removal of billions of tons of surface weight, the floor shifting subtly, pressure balancing deep within the crust. Perfectly logical, but not everyone buys that. A fringe researcher out of Borneo suggests these pulses are not the Earth readjusting, but the ocean floor responding, that it is not inert matter, but something with memory, a recording perhaps, built up over millennia, and now with the water gone, it's trying to speak. Scientists still debate whether the phenomenon is mechanical resonance or something more, but they agree on one thing: these pulses were never detectable before. Whatever is down there, whatever is resonating, needed silence to be heard. Silence like we've never known. I want to share another moment with you now, a quieter one. It comes from a dry stretch near the old coast of Peru, once under nearly 2 kilometers of ocean. A father and son walked the basin there, looking for fossilized sea life, something to remember what the world used to be. What they found instead were harbor chains, long, rusted, coiled, like sleeping snakes in the mud. The father told me in a voice message that they walked alongside one of those chains. For nearly an hour, they talked, they listened, and when they reached the end, They found nothing attached, just broken links and silence. He said his son asked, what was it holding? And all he could say was, I don't know, but whatever it was, it's free now. That stayed with me. We were always tethered to the sea in ways we didn't understand, economically, ecologically, even spiritually. And now that it's gone, we're not just untethered, we're drifting. The ships left behind are proof of that. You can see them from satellites now. Rusted hulls sprawled across the planet like punctuation marks, silent paragraphs of abandonment. Vessels that once moved cargo, people memory, now quiet, as tombs. A salvage crew in Malaysia reported a strange find. A cargo ship, perfectly intact. Lights still faintly flickering in the crew quarters. No crew, no signs of distress. A notebook, left open on the bridge with a single word written repeatedly, shallow. Some claim it's a warning. Others think it's a misinterpretation of the ship's final depth reading. Regardless, the vessel remains untouched. No one dares climb aboard. You might find that foolish, but then again, maybe we've learned to fear stillness, not because it's threatening, but because it's unfamiliar. The sea was always moving, always breathing. We lived by its rhythm. Now without it, we move slower, think deeper, or at least, we try. Here at the station, we've taken to marking time by the old tides. We still keep the schedule taped to the wall, even though the moon's pull no longer stirs anything below. There's comfort in ritual, in keeping old maps close, even if they lead nowhere. If you're listening now, and you find yourself near a harbor, a ship, a stretch of former ocean, pause for a moment, look around, listen. The quiet may feel empty, but it's not. It's memory. And somewhere beneath your feet, beneath the dry bed of a vanished sea, something is stirring. Not to threaten, not to return, just to remind us that it was once here. It's just past 10 a.m. now. The light is stronger, but it's still thin. No heat in it, just illumination, like someone turned the brightness up, but forgot the warmth. The shadows are long, but they don't stretch with purpose. They just hang. And the wind has picked up slightly, carrying the dry sighs of sand, broken glass, and what's left of old fishing nets. You're still with us, on station 1140, still tuned in, still breathing through the static and the stillness. This next hour takes us to the deepest silence of all, what used to be called the Mariana Trench, or, as some are calling it now, the Hollow. You've heard the reports, maybe you've seen the data, if you're near a functioning terminal, or still have access to the emergency science net. For those who haven't, the trench is empty, dry, exposed. It's hard to say that sentence and mean it. Harder still to understand what it means. The Mariana Trench was the deepest place on Earth, nearly 11 kilometers down, hidden beneath miles of crushing salt water, a place untouched by sunlight for eons. And now it lies bare, open, silent. A few unmanned drones have been dispatched to explore it. So far, only one has returned footage. The others lost contact within minutes of crossing the descent line. What we have seen is haunting. The walls of the trench look polished. Not natural erosion, not pressure fractures. Something smoother than stone, has any right to be. Like it's been worn down, not by time, but by intent. There are ridges, not quite symmetrical, but patterned, like claws dragged through wet clay. Fossils we can't identify. Holes that go deeper than the trench itself. Holes that don't make geological sense. One drone captured what looked like movement. Not definite, just a shimmer at the very edge of visibility. The video corrupted seconds later. Not a malfunction, just static, silence, and then nothing. Scientists still debate whether these anomalies are visual distortions caused by sediment, by light, by pressure, or if the trench is showing us something we were never meant to see. A geologist out of France believes the trench has always been more than depth, that it's a conduit, not to another place, but another state, a kind of fulcrum between planetary layers. With the water gone, it may now be resonating, vibrating differently. She calls it a wound that never scarred. Fringe groups, of course, take it further. One voice message, received from an unregistered beacon near Palau, claimed to have heard chanting rise from the basin just before sunrise. Low, slow syllables in no known language. The transmission was brief, no coordinates, no follow-up. But even those who don't believe in myths feel the shift. The trench doesn't sit still. It's not loud, but it breathes. The air around it seems to pulse, barely, but undeniably. We received another report last night, this one from a group of volunteers walking the edge of the eastern descent. They spoke of a sound, faint but persistent, like the rumble of thunder underwater, only there was no storm, no clouds, just clear skies and the soft rattle of gear as they stood at the brink. One of them swore he felt the ground pulling, not enough to cause instability, not enough to fall, just a sensation behind the knees, like something below was asking gently for attention. They left a recorder behind. It's still transmitting. No voices, no tones, just a silence that hums. There's a belief forming among the watchers, those who've made a habit of sitting at the edge, listening. They say the trench isn't dangerous. It isn't angry. It's lonely. And it's spent so long beneath the sea, touched only by darkness and the crush of salt that now suddenly exposed, it's reaching out, listening for something to fill the quiet. You don't have to believe it, but I wonder, if we're honest, haven't we all had moments like that? Moments when we're opened too quickly, left too bare, and we reach without words, without reason, for something to ease the ache. Maybe that's all the trench is doing now. And maybe, in some way, the sea protected it, covered it, kept it asleep. And now that the ocean is gone, so is the dream. Here at the station, we've received sketches from a diver who once visited the trench, back when it was still a place of water. He says what he drew then, what he saw on the instruments makes more sense now, in the absence of pressure and wave. His final sketch was of an open spiral, descending inward, labeled simply, not a shape, a sound. He hasn't spoken publicly since. We'll play one of the recordings for you in a few minutes. It's quiet, subtle, but if you listen with headphones or in a quiet room, you might hear it, that soft, rhythmic resonance beneath the static, like the sound of something enormous just beginning to stir. Not with malice, not with hunger, just with memory. So if you find yourself near what used to be the trench, if your boots crunch against bones and basalt, be still. Listen, the earth is trying to remember something, and it may need your silence to do so. It's just past 11 a.m. The light outside has settled into a pale glare, flat and without kindness. Not hot, but insistent. It reflects off everything now. Cracked salt, exposed stone, rusted surfaces, long meant to be hidden beneath waves. There are no clouds, just a high, faded sky that seems to offer no depth, as if the sky itself is thinning. If you've been with us this long, thank you. If you've only just tuned in, welcome. We're still broadcasting from the old station above Crescent Bay, still transmitting, still listening, still waiting. This hour's reports come from the former Pacific Rim, where the basin floor has begun to shift, not from quakes exactly, but from pressure. They're calling it the tsunami, with no water. Sounds theatrical, I know, but here's what's happening. The dried ocean floor, what used to be vast stretches of silt and sediment, is cracking. Slowly, quietly, sections are slumping inward, folding into themselves, creating what look like waveforms. Only they're made of dust and sand, not water. From a distance they appear frozen in motion, frozen tsunamis, rising in slow arcs across the landscape. One observer from the coast of Chile described it like watching Earth remembering how to surge. The ridges rise 5, sometimes 10 meters. They stretch for kilometers, curling like breakers that never broke. Entire fishing villages now lie beneath these silent crests, not drowned but buried. No warning, no thunder, just the soft collapse of old patterns returning in new form. One radio volunteer stationed near the edge of a former reef system caught it live. The broadcast was faint, but you could hear it. The tremble of ground, the sigh of dust, the slow approach of mass. Not fast, not violent, just steady. She kept repeating the same phrase over the signal as it passed her shelter. It's not a wave, it's a memory, pretending to be one. Her signal faded. 15 minutes later, we haven't heard from her since. Scientists still debate what's causing the formations. A leading theory is desiccation-induced collapse. The seabed, now exposed to wind and sun, is hardening unevenly. Beneath the pressure of buried water pockets and air cavities is shifting the top layer like a crust that cracks before it breaks. But others aren't convinced. They point to the symmetry, the precision. Some of the sand waves are curling in repeating patterns, too consistent to be natural. One pattern, viewed from above, even mirrors ancient wave carvings found in petroglyphs from Polynesia. A fringe community has formed around this. They say the ocean is trying to return, not as water, but as shape. But the patterns we see now are echoes, not geological, but intentional. A language written in terrain. It sounds far-fetched, but when you walk through one of these formations, when the ridges rise around you, curving like the arc of a forgotten tide, it's hard not to feel watched, not in a sinister way, just noticed, catalogued. Some have started mapping the waves, not for navigation, but for rhythm. One group in California claims to have translated part of a crest's curve into sound. They played it back through analog equipment. It wasn't a melody, it was a heartbeat. Here at the station, we've tried to recreate it. Our gear's limited, but the low-end response matches closely to what you'd expect from a whale's call. A blue whale, specifically, but deeper, slower, and impossibly still. It's likely a coincidence. Frequencies overlap. Nature reuses patterns. Still, the comparison lingers. Inland, the dust waves carry something else with them. Shells, small ones, crushed, polished, sometimes whole, not always marine. Some are spiral shapes, no one can identify. Others contain what looks like soft mineral crystal, as if formed only recently. A paleontologist from Indonesia sent us a photo of a cluster that had surfaced in the back of a pickup truck, left there overnight as the dust rolled in. They were arranged in a near-perfect ring. No one touched them. There's something about the shells, something quiet. They catch light differently. They don't roll when moved. They just stay. Some say they carry sound, that if you press one to your ear, it still echoes the sea it once belonged to.
That may be true.
But you don't even need a shell for that. Stand still. Anywhere the ocean once lived, close your eyes, and you'll hear it. The rhythm, the breath, the push of memory. We've had children draw the sand waves with chalk, with sticks, with broken bits of plastic. They draw the crests on sidewalks, in parking lots, in abandoned gas stations, not because they understand, but because they feel it.
A resonance, something old, something soft, trying to return without water.
If you are listening near a coastline, and you begin to feel the ground shift, not shaking, but tilting, step back. These aren't quakes. These are folds. Slow, curling movements of the ground beneath you. They won't roar. They won't crash, but they'll come, and when they do, they'll leave behind, not destruction, but shape. The sea isn't gone. It's just learning how to rise without being seen. It's 12 noon, high sun. Though high might be generous, the light is brighter now, but it doesn't cast sharp lines. It simply lays across the land, diffuse, even almost tired, like it's been up too long, and isn't sure what it's supposed to do anymore. You're still tuned in to Station 1140, still with us, still sharing in this quiet record of a world unraveling gently, without flame or flood, just space, stillness, silence. And now, a new report from the night side of the world, the kind of night that doesn't end with dawn, a place where the stars don't blink anymore because there's nothing left in the air to soften them. They're calling it the cloudless night. We've received messages from across the former equatorial band, Kenya, Ecuador, Indonesia, even parts of Micronesia, places that used to cling to thick cloud layers, monsoon rhythms, the protective damp of daily tropical storms. Those clouds are gone. The atmosphere is too dry now. What little moisture remains rides too high to gather. The sky is vast, clear, and sharp everywhere, at all hours. Even the moon looks closer, less gentle, a silver coin balanced on an invisible pane. One of our contacts in Sri Lanka described looking up and seeing the Milky Way so clear it felt intrusive. He said, "I didn't realize how many stars were watching." There's something unsettling about it, the clarity. Without water in the air, light travels differently, crisper, more honest. You can see farther than ever before, but somehow it feels lonelier. And then there's the disappearances, not of people, not yet, but of stars. Observers in multiple regions have reported strange patterns in the night sky, fixed stars, steady and confirmed, going dark for minutes at a time, sometimes longer. They don't blink out. There's no flash, no drama. They just stop and then, sometimes, come back. One astronomer in Chile called it sky dropout. He suspects it's due to atmospheric particulate alignment dust waves high in the stratosphere, altering the refractive index of light as the Earth rotates. A plausible explanation, but even he sounds unsure. Other voices, less scientific, say the stars are reacting to something, that they were always watchers, listeners, and now that the ocean's gone, they're adjusting their gaze, blinking, looking elsewhere. There's a growing superstition in the old highlands of New Guinea. When a star vanishes, you're meant to hold your breath, not for safety, not out of fear, but out of respect. The silence between breaths, they say, honors whatever moved between the light and you. It might seem irrational, but when you're out there in the open, surrounded by the absence of sea and the presence of too much sky, you begin to understand. The nighttime air is thinner than it used to be. Not dangerously so. Not yet, but noticeably. Campfires don't climb as high. Smoke disperses too quickly. Voices lose strength beyond 10 paces. People are speaking more softly now, not out of reverence, but because they don't want to echo. A field report from a weather station outside Luanda captured an entire night in real time. A single camera, a wide-angle lens. The footage shows a man sitting beneath a rock outcrop, looking at the stars. For 6 hours, he doesn't move. Around him, wind lifts dry grass, a fire flickers, and above, hundreds of stars, frozen and perfect, except one. One star, in the upper right quadrant, fades, then returns, then fades again, in perfect rhythm, once every 11 minutes. He never reacts, just watches. The footage ends before morning. Scientists still debate whether these stellar changes are genuine or perception-based. Some suggest electromagnetic field fluctuations could be distorting our view of the sky, similar to the way light bends through heat haze. Others believe dust particles carried from the dried seabeds are accumulating in the atmosphere and settling into thin, high layers that interfere with light transmission. But none of the models account for the timing, the regularity, the silence. A fringe group in Western Australia now gathers nightly under the cloudless sky. They lie flat on the ground, arms at their sides, eyes open, waiting for a star to blink. When it does, they whisper a single word, "Gone." They say nothing else. Then they wait for the next. We've started marking them here too. Our studio logbook has a new section, Sky Loss. If you see one fade, and you're certain of it, feel free to send us the time, your location, and your best description. We'll add it to the record, because if this is the world remembering itself, the sky deserves to be remembered too. Back near the former coasts, some have taken to recreating constellations in the sand, using driftwood, shells, old glass bottles, tracing Orion's belt across the seabed, writing messages in the shape of stars. One said, "We're still watching too." So tonight, when your eyes drift upward, if they do, take a moment. Breathe slowly, count what's there, notice what's missing. And if something fades, let it go gently. The ocean isn't the only thing that's retreating. It's just after 1 p.m. now, and the light is holding steady, still pale, still dry. There are no clouds, no haze, just a thin white sky stretched like linen above a world that seems to have stopped blinking. The wind outside the station has quieted again. No more gusts, just the soft push of air moving through open land. This hour, our reports come from deep inland, where the old ocean has begun to creep into memory. Not as water, but as artifact. The dust is reaching farther now, carrying more than salt, more than shells. It's carrying boats. Yes, actual boats. Sailboats, rowboats, fishing skiffs, canoes, some fiberglassed, some wooden, a few barely more than hulls, appearing in strange places, but not in the ports, not where you'd expect, but in fields, in valleys, in dry plains miles from the nearest coast. No water around them, no tire tracks, no explanation. They're just there. The first report came out of Arkansas. Believe it or not, a man walking through his cornfield after harvest, looking for anything that survived the heat, came across a small white sailboat resting gently between the stalks. No drag marks, no soil displacement, just resting there, keel sunk slightly into the dry earth. He thought it was a prank, until his neighbor found one the next morning, half buried near a drainage ditch. Then came reports from Italy, an olive grove outside Lecce, a boat, blue hull, sail tied neatly around the mast. Empty. Then Kansas. Then Namibia. Then inland Russia. The same kind of craft. Always alone. Weathered, but not decayed. Untethered, but resting with perfect balance. Some with ropes, still coiled. Some with radios tuned to static. The professor in Manitoba mapped the coordinates of the first 50 confirmed sightings. There's no geographic pattern, no latitude correlation, but when he overlaid them with ancient maritime routes from the early colonial period to mid-20th century shipping lanes, something strange emerged. Each boat sits directly above where the ocean once held its busiest traffic. It's as if the sea remembered its lanes, and the land is echoing them now. Scientists still debate whether these appearances are hoaxes, misreports, or psychological projections in regions dealing with high climate stress. That's the official line. Stress-related fabrication, but the evidence is piling up. Too many witnesses, too many identical boats, and none of them have been claimed. One listener in Romania found one just outside a dilapidated barn. He stepped inside and found a captain's logbook, blank, save for one line in the middle of the first page. Still sailing, even here. He hasn't opened it since. There's something reverent in the way people describe these boats. No one tries to move them. No one tries to salvage parts or paint over names. They're left exactly as they are, like headstones or artifacts or messages. Children climb inside them and pretend to row. Elderly folks sit in them with thermoses of tea, watching the horizon like it might rise again. And all the while, the boats stay quiet, unmoving, as if resting after a long voyage. No one remembers. Fringe theorists have come forward with ideas. One claims that the dried ocean has begun uncoiling its shape across the earth, that wherever the sea once moved, it's now dreaming itself into form, that these boats are memories made real. Others say they're returning vessels the sea held in its depth, now released, not from malice, just from forgetting. There's a story making the rounds from an inland school in Wyoming. A class on local geography was interrupted when a teacher spotted something in the distance, beyond the playground, just over the rise. A kayak. Yellow, bright, and unmistakable. She took the children out to see it. They sat inside it, 2 at a time, and read stories aloud from the school's only book on marine life. When they returned the next day, it was gone. Scientists can't explain that one either. Some have taken to calling these phenomena sea ghosts. Not spirits, not supernatural, just remnants. The way fog clings to a shoreline long after the storm has passed. We've started logging the boat appearances here, cataloging their names when they have them, posting coordinates when they're sent in. If you find one, don't disturb it. Sit with it. If you like, speak to it. If you feel moved, or just watch the wind roll over the deck, and let it remind you that movement leaves traces, even after it stops. Here at the station, we found our own boat yesterday, not near the tower, but down the road by the old garden fence. A dinghy, wooden, no name. Inside, a folded tarp, a faded map, and a single oar. We left it alone, but this morning, I sat in it for a while. The air was still, the ground firm beneath it, and for a few moments, I could swear I felt it rock. Not from wind, not from motion, just memory. The sea, remembering how to carry something. It's 2 p.m. now. The sun is overhead, but not strong. No glare, no shimmer. Just a dull spotlight, hanging over the stillness of things. Outside the studio, The hills have lost their color. What was once green is now a faded mix of tan and white grass, turned brittle. Dust settled into every fold of bark, and yet somewhere beneath all that, the ground still breathes. This hour, our signals reach deeper into the dried seabeds, where a few scattered teams are now digging, not for treasure, not for oil, but for something more elusive. Evidence, not of collapse, but of memory. We're talking about the layers beneath the ocean floor, the crusts and folds, and hidden pockets that for millennia were buried under kilometers of moving water. These areas are exposed now, and the people walking them are discovering things that shouldn't be there. We're not talking about fossils. Not exactly. Not trilobites or ammonites or dinosaur bones. We're talking about structures.
Outlines of things in stone, symmetries in silt, carvings that follow no known language.
One report came in from a team near the southern edge of the former Indian Ocean basin. They were following what looked like a natural fault line, until it became a corridor. Stone blocks, clean angles, spaced too precisely to be accidental. No writing, no figures, just direction. Downward. They didn't go far. The air shifted the moment they entered, thinner, colder, despite the heat. One man described the feeling as walking into a throat. They turned back after 20 meters, marked a site, left quietly. Elsewhere, in what used to be the Caribbean Sea, another group found the fossilized remains of something huge. Not marine life, not mammalian. The description was vague, a shape we couldn't measure. The bones were soft, crumbling to dust under their own weight, but the outline remained. Spines along a curve, jaw-like ridges, a cavity big enough to hold a van. No photos were sent, just a sketch charcoal on cloth, and a note that read, "It wasn't dead, it was paused." That's the word that keeps coming up in these reports. Paused, like whatever lies beneath wasn't killed, but shelved, archived, held in place by the weight of water. And now that the weight is gone, so is the seal. Scientists still debate whether these findings are genuine or the result of pareidolia, the mind's tendency to see order in randomness. A crack becomes a symbol, a rock becomes a ribcage, but the consistency of the reports, the repetition of terms across language and location, is hard to ignore. A fringe hypothesis, gaining traction, proposes that beneath the ocean floor lies an earlier Earth, not another civilization, but another version, a cycle lost to time, buried under what became the sea. They point to certain sediment layers that don't line up with modern geologic understanding, fossils that appear in the wrong era, structures that defy tectonic history. If true, it means the ocean didn't just cover life, it preserved it, or something else did. And now, with the water gone, that preservation is unraveling. We've been monitoring low-band signals from the excavation zones. They're faint, erratic, mostly static, but sometimes a pulse, a sequence, the kind you find in coded transmissions or in heartbeats. One recording, captured off the former coast of Western Australia, contains a frequency that matches no known broadcast standard. When slowed down, it forms a pattern resembling breath: 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. Loop, no transmitter nearby, just the land itself, pulsing softly in rhythm. What's beneath the surface may not be speaking in words, but it's making itself known. Closer to home, small discoveries are being made in ordinary places: backyard trenches, riverbeds long dry, shards of coral fused to ceramic, shells embedded in wood. One farmer, in coastal Oregon found a perfect imprint of a sea urchin inside a tree stump. No idea how it got there. Maybe the sea reaches farther than we thought. Or maybe time doesn't move in the straight line we imagine. Maybe it loops. Maybe it lingers. There's something comforting about that idea, that even as the oceans vanish, they leave behind echoes too stubborn to fade, fragments of stories, pieces of shape. Here at the station, we keep a drawer full of these fragments, things listeners have sent in, photos, rubbings, small stones etched with lines they swear weren't there yesterday. We don't verify them, we just keep them. Because maybe that's what this moment is for. Not survival, not rebuilding, just noticing. So if you're near the seabed, if you live close to where water once slept, keep your eyes open. If you dig and find nothing, keep digging. If you find something strange, don't rush to explain it. Sit with it.
Let the silence wrap around it.
Sometimes, the truth arrives slower than we'd like, but it always leaves signs. It's 3 p.m. here at the station. The light has stopped shifting. It's just there now, hanging over the land, without movement or intention. Not bright, not dim. A kind of exhausted clarity, like the world has decided to pause for a moment longer before doing anything else. And still, the signal holds. You're listening to Station 1140, wherever you are, whether your world is dust or green, silent or singing. We're still reaching out. We received a transmission this morning, crackly but complete, from a voice we hadn't heard in days. A man calling himself the last fisherman. He didn't give a location, no coordinates, just a gentle, sand-grit voice, filtering through low static, said he was somewhere along the edge of former Gulf, where the floor still smells like brine. He's living on a trawler, beached, tilted to one side. The ship's name has been scratched out, not vandalized, just erased, the way time rubs at things when no one's watching. He's been transmitting once daily, using an old Marine VHF set, patched into a car battery. His signal doesn't always carry, but when it does, it drifts in like a tide we forgot to expect. This morning's message was soft. He said, "The nets are still hanging. I check them every day. There's nothing in them, not even wind, but I check anyway, because that's what I know how to do." He's not asking for help. He's not trying to be found. He just talks, describes what he sees. The curve of the basin at dawn, the shadow his boat casts on dry ground, the way gulls still follow him, out of habit more than hope. He says he keeps a journal, writes the weather every morning, even though it hasn't changed in weeks. He logs the tides too, writes 0 under height every day, a line of zeros like a code that means something only to him. He also told a story about a fish not caught, seen. It happened 2 nights ago, just after dusk. He stepped down from the bridge to check the nets, and there, in the thin air above the dried seafloor, was a fish floating. He didn't say it was flying. He didn't say it was swimming, just suspended, a few feet off the ground, fins barely moving, eyes wide, gills still opening and closing, though there was no water. He said he looked at it, and it looked at him. Then it turned gently and moved away. No splash, no wind, no sound, gone. Scientists still debate whether such sightings are the product of stress, memory projection, or atmospheric distortion. Hallucinations aren't uncommon when surrounded by silence. For too long, the mind starts to recreate the rhythms it misses. But he didn't sound confused, or frightened, or even amazed. He just said, I think it was checking on me. You don't have to believe it, but I've heard that tone before from people who've lost something and are learning to live alongside the absence. The thing about fishermen is that they understand waiting. That's what the sea taught them. Patience, surrender, the quiet belief that something will rise out of the unseen. He said the boat groans more now, the wood expanding, shrinking, cracking without the cushion of moisture. He spends most of his time below deck, reading, tuning the radio, listening to the floor. He says, it creaks like a dock, like something is still moving beneath him. When we asked if he planned to leave, he paused for a long time, then said, I'm not stranded, I'm anchored. That stayed with me all afternoon. There are other voices like his now, other people choosing to remain near the dried out harbors, the cracked bays, the hollow docks. They sit in their boats, listen to radios, mark time with old instruments, not clinging to the past, but inhabiting it, respecting the shape it left behind. One woman in northern Chile calls herself a wave watcher. She walks the basin every day and logs visual impressions, curves in the land that resemble surf, dunes shaped like breakers. She says it's like the sea tried to leave an imprint of itself, a kind of signature written across the earth. She sends sketches, sometimes sparse, wide lines, arcs, ripples, always drawn with charcoal on faded sea charts. No dates, no labels, just lines. Scientists still debate whether these residual patterns are coincidental or formed by prevailing winds and the dry remnants of underwater currents now made visible in the absence of water. But for many, the theory doesn't matter. What matters is the rhythm, that somewhere in all this silence, something still moves. The last fisherman ended his message this morning by asking if we could play a specific recording, one we hadn't thought of in years. A simple track, a harbor soundscape, wooden boats nudging one another, bells, water slapping against docks, distant seagulls. We played it an hour ago, and since then we've received dozens of messages from across the network, people saying they remembered where they were, the first time they heard it, what they smelled, what they felt, who they sat beside. It didn't fix anything, but it opened a door. So if you're listening now, and you're near a boat, even one resting in a field or yard or roadside ditch, sit in it for a while. Let the silence settle around you. Press your ear to the hull. You might hear nothing.
Or you might hear a creak.
A breath, the weight of memory, shifting gently beneath you. And if you hear a voice, answer it. Sometimes, all a wave needs is someone to speak back. It's 4 p.m. now. The sun is inching west, though the sky doesn't change much anymore. Still pale, still dry, still open in a way that feels too wide to understand. Light filters through the windows like dust, soft-edged and tired. Even the shadows seem unsure of their place. You're still tuned to station 1140, and we're still speaking into the static. One slow hour at a time, one quiet breath after the next. This next report isn't about ships or trenches or strange geometry. It's about rain. Yes, it came. Briefly, unexpectedly, for 10 minutes. No thunder, no wind, just the sound of droplets falling on rusted metal and dry glass. We received the first confirmation from a high-altitude zone in the Eastern Alps. A weather observer stationed near an old listening post wrote, "The sky cracked without sound. The light dimmed. Then it fell. Soft, heavy, salty." He collected a sample, measured its pH, found it was acidic, burly, but enough to etch faint marks into metal surfaces. The smell was wrong too. Not petrichor, not ozone. He described it as iron and brine, like old blood and sea air. Others confirmed it. Northern India, western Turkey, a stretch of southern Peru, all within the same window of time. A narrow band of rainfall, thin and precise, sweeping across continents like a forgotten thread. Some collected it. Some let it fall. One listener in the Midwest stood barefoot on his porch and let it soak his shirt. He called in right after, said it felt like crying, but not mine. The rainfall ended as suddenly as it began. The sky returned to its endless pale. The air was heavier afterward, but only slightly, and the smell lingered for hours. For those who missed it, the sound was recorded. Tin roofs ticking, leaves shivering, dry soil hissing softly with each drop. No thunder, no crescendo, just presence. We played the recording earlier today. A few of you asked us to play it again. So we will, after the next segment. It's not long, just long enough to remember what falling water feels like. Scientists still debate what caused the event. Some propose high-altitude vapor pockets, remnants of deep-sea evaporation carried up by convection currents now spiraling unchecked. Others think it was an artificial release, an old weather manipulation program still trying to complete a long-abandoned cycle. A more unusual theory posits that the rain wasn't atmospheric at all, that it rose from below, that deep within the earth, whatever pressure was holding the seas in place slipped for a moment, just long enough to let a breath escape. If that's true, it means the water is still there, somewhere, and that it still remembers how to rise. A poet in Greece wrote to us this morning, said he stood in the rain and whispered the name of every river he could remember: Nile, Danube, Ganges, Ebro, Tigris. He said, it wasn't prayer, just recognition. That's what this rain felt like. Not an answer, not a return, just a tap on the shoulder, a moment of wait, a reminder, and then it was gone. In a coastal ghost town once called San Blas, someone found a puddle that didn't dry, just one, in the middle of a broken road, less than 2 inches deep, still, clear, no algae, no insects, no disturbance. It reflected the sky so perfectly, a photograph of it looked like a hole into another world. They've marked the spot, placed stones around it. Some kneel beside it in the evenings. Not worship, not wonder, just thanks. It hasn't rained again since. Not in those places. Not yet.
But there's a word spreading now, from language to language, translated and retranslated.
Revenir, to return, not as it was, not in full, just enough. We received a message this afternoon from a boy in Morocco. He wrote, "The rain touched my roof. I drank one drop. It tasted like the ocean I've never seen." That's the power of a moment like this. It makes us remember things we've only heard about, makes us feel nostalgia for something we never experienced. Here at the station, we saved a few drops ourselves, caught them in an old mixing bowl. They evaporated within the hour, but the bowl smells different now, like kelp and copper and thunder held in memory.
And that's enough.
If you're listening now, and the sky above you is clear, take a moment to watch it anyway, even if there's no sign of change, even if the clouds never come, because sometimes the sky doesn't need to break to speak. Sometimes it just needs to be witnessed. And if, by chance, a drop finds you, don't run. Let it fall. Let it remind you that water like memory, always finds a way home. It's 5 p.m. now. The sky hasn't changed. The land hasn't either. And yet, something feels different.
The wind's picked up just a little. Not strong, but purposeful. You can hear it brushing through broken trees, tugging gently at whatever fabric still hangs from fence posts and ship masts, as if the world is clearing its throat, preparing for something.
You're tuned to station 1140, still broadcasting, still receiving, still here. Today's report brings us back to the basins, the deepest pockets of what used to be the sea. Only this time, we're not talking about surface patterns or visible formations. We're talking about reclamation. Over the past 48 hours, quiet tremors have been recorded across multiple ex-seafloor zones. Nothing violent, just motion. But these aren't standard seismic events. They're subductions in reverse. Instead of the crust sliding under, it's rising, lifting, folding, reshaping itself upward in slow, deliberate arcs, as if the earth is correcting a slouch, as if the space once pressed down by water is now exhaling. One signal came from the middle of the Mariana Basin. Relay buoy, previously thought destroyed, activated without warning. Its beacon wasn't strong, just a tone, slow, repeating. The signal was triangulated and confirmed. The location? A submerged vent that hasn't shown activity in centuries. The new images show cracks widening, gently, across kilometers of terrain, chasms forming in geometric lines. Not erratic, not random, like seams being loosened by careful hands. A few deep observers, teams still camped along the rim of the exposed trench, have described sounds rising with the motion, not the groan of rock or the snap of fault lines. No, low thunder, not above, below. It rolls slowly, deep, measured, as if the ground is stretching before waking. No one knows how long it will last, or if it will intensify, but the movement is spreading, eastward, across the dry Pacific floor, toward what used to be the Galapagos. One geologist suggested the crust is simply settling, finding its new shape in the absence of pressure, but another, more hesitant, proposed something else. The sea didn't just leave, it was pushed down, pushed away, or pushed inward. The language isn't clear, but the implications are. And now, the deep floor may be reclaiming what it once held. A team out of Micronesia reported that an entire stretch of the basin, 3 kilometers wide, collapsed inward without warning. No sound, no warning tremor, just a slow sinking, like a bowl caving in beneath cloth. They placed a recorder at the rim. It caught 6 hours of silence, followed by 3 distinct tones, echoes, notes, almost like the world beneath had something to say, and took its time saying it. And then the static returned. One theory posits that methane pockets, once sealed by water pressure, are now destabilizing, that these sudden drops and rises are simply the planet's way of venting. But others argue the shifts are too organized. They say the pattern looks intentional, like the Earth is rearranging the space for a reason, a purpose. We don't know what that reason is, but we can feel it. One of our listeners, an old radio technician from Malaysia, said it best. The ground isn't falling apart. It's standing back up. Here in the studio, we've placed an old globe in the corner, one of the heavy ones, from the library basement. We've turned it upside down, not to be clever, just to remind ourselves that up and down don't mean what they used to. That maybe we're the ones who need to reorient.
But there's something else too.
The old radio towers, those tall skeletons that line former coastlines, they're beginning to fail. Not from age, not from leaning.
Several towers along the Australian rim have begun listing inward toward the former basin, not all at once. Just slightly, a degree or two, as if pulled.
Engineers claim it's due to shifting soil. The seabed was never meant to support tall structures without the buoyant damp of sea air. But a fringe group of signal watchers suggests a different cause. They believe the tilt is intentional, that the tower's metal, wire, carbon memory are answering something, or someone. We're not endorsing that view, but we've begun to check the angle of our own mast. No change yet. Still, we watch, and we listen. Always, if you're near the basins, if the ground beneath you feels heavier, if the horizon seems wrong, if the air hums when you place your hand on the earth, know this: the floor is not done moving. The ocean may have gone, but the body it left behind is learning how to stand.
And maybe how to walk.
It's 6 p.m. now, evening, by the clock, but there's no golden hour, no soft light, just a dimming sky, with no color. Like the world is losing its palette, one hue at a time. The trees outside the station barely move. The air is thick in a new way. Not wet, not warm, just dense, like it's holding its breath. Still with us. Good. You're tuned to station 1140. Still steady, still low on power, but high on purpose. Still threading the signal through the cracks. This hour we talk about something many of you have already noticed. There's no moon tonight. Not behind clouds. Not hiding in shadow. Just absent. We've had dozens of messages. Quiet ones. People writing in. Not panicking. Just wondering. Looking up and seeing nothing where they expected something ancient. You could argue it's timing, that it's a new moon, positioned with perfect subtlety between us and the sun. And that's likely true, astronomically speaking. But this isn't the first night it's gone missing. And the longer the sea stays dry, the more people are starting to notice that the moon is acting strangely. Not in orbit, no sudden shifts. It's still on the charts, still ticking through its cycle, but dim, less reflective, less sure. Some astronomers say the albedo has dropped, that the surface is scattering less light. Could be dust, could be atmospheric distortion, but others say it's psychological. That with the tides gone, we've lost the moon's context.
We don't feel its pull anymore, not in the water, not in our bodies. The cycles it used to guide sleep, blood, breath, they feel loose, off rhythm, as if we're spinning through time, slightly unsynced.
People say they're sleeping less, dreaming in loops, waking without knowing why.
A woman in Newfoundland wrote us a letter, longhand, folded into a hand-stitched envelope. Inside she wrote, "I used to know when the full moon was coming. I could feel it in my knees. Now I just feel blank." She ended the letter with a drawing. The ocean, dry, the moon, upside down, a single line connecting them, like a tether cut halfway through. However, fringe thinkers are leaning into this. Some say the moon is leaving, not fast, not visibly, but backing away, millimeter by millimeter, as if disowning the earth. They believe it was always part of the system that held the sea in place, that without the water, the moon no longer has a role, or worse, that it was never ours to begin with. Just a visitor, watching, waiting, and now quietly withdrawing. A quiet transmission from a mountaintop observatory in Nepal came through earlier today. A lone astronomer there has been watching lunar behavior since before the vanishing. He says the light reflects differently now. The shadows move wrong, slower, slurred, like speech after a bad dream. He called it morning light, said he's been tracking the moon's path nightly, and believes it's wobbling, a natural phenomenon, usually harmless, but this time it seems to hesitate at each arc, as if unsure. He's written it off as personal observation fatigue, but his voice, even over static, didn't sound tired. It sounded lonely. There's an old belief, buried in ancient calendars, that the moon and the sea were siblings. One rose, one held, both governed by gravity, but bound by something more. Some say when one fades, the other must follow. We don't teach those stories anymore, but maybe the earth remembers. We've checked the local tide clocks, those old brass ones nailed to seaside cottages and marine walls. They still tick, but their hands spin without pause now. No rhythm, no beat, just motion without meaning, like the sky above. Here at the station, we set a chair out earlier, faced it east, waited for the moon to rise. Nothing, just a thin stretch of air, quiet and unbroken. But we stayed there anyway, because sometimes it's not about seeing, it's about witnessing, holding space for something that may still return. So if you're out there tonight and your sky is clear, step outside, look up. Not for an answer, not even for the moon, just for the space it used to fill. Feel the absence of pull. Let it settle into your spine. And remember, we were shaped by the tide, formed by the ocean, but we were guided by light. And if that light is going out, we'll need to learn how to walk in the dark together. It's 7 p.m. now. Evening has come, though it doesn't announce itself the way it used to. No slow bloom of color across the sky. No gradual deepening of blue, just a soft fade, like a stage light dimming on a world that forgot its lines. The horizon has disappeared entirely. Land and air now blend into a single band of quiet.
You're still with us here at station 1140. Still tuned in, still sharing the slow unraveling of a planet, learning how to be still.
This hour we speak not of oceans or moons, but of shorelines, or what's left of them. We've spent the last few weeks tracking the movement of the dry tide, how it etched itself across the continents like a scar, but now the focus has shifted to the edges, the margins, the in-between places where sea once met land, and where something else is forming now. They're being called the salt forests. You've probably seen the photos by now. Mossy shapes rising from the dust, white and grey, and strangely geometric. Some stretch waist high, others no more than threads, but they all have one thing in common. They grow, not like plants, not like coral, but something in between. They anchor into old sediment, fuse with what's left of barnacle beds, and stretch upwards spirals, stalks, branching curls. They're soft when touched, almost warm, and they sing when the wind moves through them. That's the part scientists can't explain. The salt crystals forming these shapes are ordinary. Sodium chloride, calcium carbonate, mineral residue left behind by retreating water, but the structures they build are anything but repeating forms. Even spacing. Some have hollow chambers inside, like wind instruments waiting to be played. A team out of Kyoto recorded one field overnight, just microphones, no interference. At 3:11 a.m., a breeze passed through. The playback is haunting. Not music, not voice, but tone. A long, low resonance, like the sound of a glass harp played with gloves, familiar but unreachable. One listener described it as a lullaby the earth forgot. Fringe observers believe the salt forests are the earth's morning ritual, that, in the absence of water, the land is trying to recreate the sound it once knew, that this is how the shore sings without waves. We've mapped several of these forests now, scattered along former coastlines in Namibia, Western Ireland, Indonesia, and the Chilean fjords, always in the same conditions, where sea once touched cliff, where brine once splashed over stone. Some grow overnight, others rearrange themselves. A field team in Baja left a ring of flags around one cluster, came back 20 hours later to find the formation had shifted 2 feet west. No footprints, no wing damage, just moved. There's no known biological function, no signs of life, but under UV light, the crystals pulse with faint phosphorescence. Scientists still debate whether this is residual marine energy trapped in sediment or the effect of piezoelectricity triggered by wind vibration. But the data doesn't hold steady. No 2 forests measure the same. No 2 sing in the same tone. They're not identical, but they're all listening. Here at the station, we've built a small sculpture from salt shards gathered near the cliffs. Nothing elaborate, just a twist of crystal in a spiral dish. We've left a mic pointed at it for the past 3 nights. Last night, around 2:30 a.m., the dish made a sound. Soft. 1 tone. Then silence. We don't know if it means anything, but we recorded it anyway. Because sometimes we don't document things because they're important. We document them because they happened. A child in Greenland sent us a message, a photograph of her holding one of these salt structures. She found it at the edge of what used to be the Arctic Sea. She said it was humming just slightly. When she picked it up, she put it on her windowsill, said it makes her room feel less empty.
That's what these shapes do. These forests, these strange silent choirs of salt.
They fill space with pattern, with intention, not to replace what's been lost, but to remind us that the earth, even wounded, still builds. So if you walk along what used to be the coast and you see something growing, white brittle, beautiful, don't touch it. Not yet. Sit near it. Listen. And when the wind begins to move through, close your eyes. Let the sound wash over you.
And remember,
this is the new tide. It doesn't come in. It rises from within. It's 8 p.m. now. The last stretch of daylight has faded. What's left is something quieter, darker, but not frightening. The sky is blank again. No moon, no clouds, just a low silver wash of stars like dust scattered across glass. You're still here, still listening to Station 1140. One last hour, one last message, before we dim the lights and let the world fall back into its hush. Tonight, we're talking about echoes. Not sound, exactly, but presence. We've been collecting reports all week from listeners in coastal ruins, old port towns, dry beaches, lighthouses, left without purpose, and they all speak of the same strange sensation, a feeling that something is still moving, not seen,
not heard,
but moving. One listener in Tangier described it as a shadow that never touches anything. She walks the old promenade every morning and swears she hears footsteps behind her, but only when she's standing where the tide line used to be. Others say they hear voices, not conversations, just single words, half a name, a warning, a laugh, always faint, always just out of reach. In a research outpost near the Gulf of Thailand, a technician left a parabolic mic running for 3 nights straight, aimed toward the empty seafloor. The first 2 nights, nothing. The third, a single whisper. Return. We've confirmed it wasn't a loop, not interference, just a tone, shaped like a word, carried by wind from a place that should be silent. It's easy to dismiss these things as tricks of the ear, the mind filling silence with memory. But they're consistent. They follow old waterlines, former currents, forgotten migratory paths. It's as if the world is still reverberating, as if the loss of the ocean created a negative space so large it hasn't finished echoing yet. One physicist likened it to a bell, said, if you strike something as vast as an ocean, even its absence will ring for centuries. Maybe that's what we're hearing now. Not ghosts, not spirits, just the last notes of something massive, vanishing too quickly to go quietly. We've received footage too, short clips, time lapses, wind-bending grass in spirals, always toward the same point, dust lifting in arcs, birds flying low, as if following a current that no longer exists. In Northern California, a man found a buoy, rusted, grounded in a dry inlet. Every evening at 6:43, it tilts slightly, just once. He's marked it, timed it, recorded it. No wind, no shift in weight, just a small movement, like something invisible brushing past. Scientists still debate whether we're witnessing magnetospheric disturbance, acoustic memory, or simple coincidence. But one theory, quietly passed around the deep archives, suggests that the sea was never empty, that it held something, not a creature, not a consciousness, but a rhythm. And now that rhythm is searching for form, searching for something to fill. Here at the station, we've begun to feel it too. A soft pressure in the air, a pull just behind the ears, like the start of a song you used to know, but can't quite hum. We've started broadcasting that tone, the one we caught weeks ago from the trench, just once an hour. You've probably heard it. A low, almost inaudible pulse. It's not a warning. It's a beacon, a way to say, we're still here. A listener in Nova Scotia left us this. I sit on the dry dock each night and whisper, thank you, into the wind, not for what's gone, but for what remains. My voice comes back quieter, but it comes back. That's what an echo is, in the end. Proof that something listened. Proof that something is still listening. So tonight, wherever you are, whether you're alone or surrounded, in a city or at the edge of the world, open a window if you can. Stand at the place where land meets absence and speak. Say anything. A name, a thought, a goodbye, and listen, not for a reply, but for the silence that follows. That silence means something heard you.
That silence means you're not alone.
That silence means the world still knows you are here.